I did not make an update for the last 6 days because I went somewhere and did something.
It was crazy actually, because one of the
Russian main offensive is happening right now. Russians are storming with infantry and armored units Vuhledar area, Bakhmut area, and from Svatovia. Their 24-hour period KIA numbers are making records, and we have tons of new videos that resemble videos from the start of the war, where there are many Russian convoys being destroyed. For example, this video is filmed on a Vuhledar axis by a Russian soldier actually, who acknowledges the huge losses of the Russian armored forces near Vuhledar. Vuhledar has a lot of fields around it, and they are mined to oblivion by Ukrainian forces, so as soon as any Russian units leave their roads, they immediately hit mines. But it's not an issue because I guess Russians like to remove Ukrainian anti-armor mines with their tanks. I mean, it works, but it's not very cost-effective. This next video perfectly summarizes the big, grand Russian offensive that is going on right now. Look at this huge Russian convoy. It is storming Vuhledar. It has about 30 vehicles in it, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and some trucks. Since the fields are mined by Ukrainian forces, the Russians prefer to just ride on this one road in a huge convoy under enemy artillery fire. Casual Tuesday in the Russian army. As soon as some vehicles decide to leave the road a few meters into the field to bypass some blockages on the road, they hit mines. This is about 2 armored battalions being annihilated by Ukrainian artillery and mines. And note that they haven't even come into contact with Ukrainian ground forces. This was a very one-sided battle, a huge loss for the Russians. This is how their huge offensive is going. On this photo, the ongoing results of the huge Russian offensive are summarized. They have captured about 1 to 3 villages, depending on which side's information you believe, and the price for that is about 5,000 plus KIA per week for the Russian side. Of course, the Ukrainians are taking very heavy casualties. Holding back this Russian offensive is not easy for Ukraine. Here are the Russian losses in the past 24 hours. Notice the increase in artillery pieces. These artillery pieces are transported closer to the front to support the infantry and armored vehicles storming Vuhledar or Bakhmut, and immediately they are taken out by Ukrainian drones and counter-artillery. Also, the armed forces of Ukraine in the last 24 hours shot down 2 Russian aircraft, an Su-24M and an Su-25, one of them in Bakhmut area. In this video, we see the Ukrainian 24th Separate Assault Battalion Aidar on the outskirts of Bakhmut. Ukrainians counterattack as soon as Russians occupy any new territory or positions, and sometimes these counterattacks are very deadly for the Russians because the Russians are usually not able to consolidate their positions until Ukrainians already counterattack. Also notice the Ukrainian winter camo. It gives a very good edge to the Ukrainian infantry moving through snow. It really makes a difference. Russians are having big logistical issues with supplying winter camo and winter warm clothing to their troops on the front. Here are some clips of my training in deep snow back in my army days. It's quite difficult to spot an infantryman in full winter camo in a snowy forest. If he doesn't move, you don't see him. But how is the Ukrainian situation in Bakhmut? This is Magyar from Bakhmut. He gives us a first-hand report what's going on there. Let's watch it.
Бажаю міцного. 12 лютого по обіду. В Бахмуті досить тихенько. Але це така обманлива тиша. А в передмістях східної і південної частини тривають вуличні бої. А нарешті від завтра вже закриють доступ офіційно закриють доступ, ну, обіцяють, принаймні я чув, цивільних осіб до Бахмуту. Це варто було раніше, мабуть, зробити, щоб не наражати на небезпеку нікого.
I've talked to some troops from Bakhmut recently face to face, and they tell me that Ukrainian army has banned access for Ukrainian civilians into Bakhmut, so you cannot really go into Bakhmut unless you're a soldier now. That means Ukrainian army acknowledges the incredibly difficult situation in Bakhmut. Any day now they might have to pull out. We don't know this, and they have held on against incredible odds for months. And I have been saying this for months, that any day they might have to pull out, and they still haven't. Nobody knows. But Russians have bled for this city, and this is what the Ukrainians want from this city, for Russians to bleed out.
Було дуже хмарність, зараз навіть сонечко на 15 хвилин вилізло. Важко бути убезпеченим від того, що диверсійні групи ворога не проникають окремими групками у місто і наражати на небезпеку навіть волонтерів, що з благими намірами сюди їдуть допомогти цивільному населенню, обов'язково потрібно. І то цю заборону, якщо вона справді буде введена, вважаю своєчасною і потрібною, засобом потрібним, бо тут не є спокійно і наразі ситуація хоч і контрольована, але вона контрольована військовими і бути впевнений за кожного окремого цивільного немає можливості. Тож з розумінням до того віднесіться, військові надалі будуть посильно.
Yeah, the soldiers that I talked to from Bakhmut said there are about 2,000 to 3,000 civilians still in Bakhmut and they refuse to leave despite the Ukrainian army asking them to leave for a long, long time. They refuse, it's their home, they don't want to, they're very stubborn, so they're going to stay. And the soldiers told me that the army is not able to protect everyone individually. They have to fight, they have to be on their positions. They cannot be responsible what the Russians will do with the civilians if they take that house. Because in Bakhmut right now, in the suburbs, the fighting is going on not for the streets, but for individual houses. It resembles Stalingrad, honestly.
Підвозити якусь допомогу тим місцевим жителям, що тут залишаються. Присутність тут цивільних, що зовні приїхали допомогти, вона є зайвою. Бахмут був, є і залишається українським, то наше головне гасло, але мусимо розуміти, що по флангам, далеким флангам Бахмуту ворог робить регулярні спроби.
The only reason why Russians started to attack the Bakhmut from the south and north to encircle it from the flanks is because they were unable to storm the city straight on for 6 months. Wagner Group failed on this, and that is why the Russian army took over after Gerasimov took the lead from Putin's orders, and then Russian designed elite forces were routed to Bakhmut to start attacking the flanks. And this is what's been going on. They have found some more success in that than storming Bakhmut for 6 months straight head on.
Спроби оточити то місто, і це вже не залежить від безпосередньо захисту фортеці Бахмут, а це вже така окремо реалізована тактика навколо Бахмуту, залежить від великої кількості обставин. Наразі все контрольовано і помірно.
Bakhmut's military importance shows itself in two things. It's on a high ground, that's number one. If Russians gain that high ground, they will have an edge in artillery missions over the Ukrainian defensive lines that are behind Bakhmut, which are already built out in case Bakhmut falls. And secondly, the importance of Bakhmut for Ukrainian military is the fact that Russia is fixated on it and will bleed itself out for the city. Ukrainians know this, and they guide more reserves into the city for Russians to guide more men to the attacks. Almost 1 year has passed since Russia invaded Ukraine on 24th of February, and Russian army is still facing the very same issues. We have seen Ukrainian army being transformed with Western weaponry and training, fighting according to NATO standards using Western intelligence, but Russian army has not changed much. The logistics is still horrible, still heavily relies on trains. Their air force is uncoordinated with the ground forces. Their communications on the ground is open or it doesn't exist. Their artillery lacks munitions. The Kremlin's power structure is very rigid, so is the Russian army system. If a system is incredibly rigid, it is very hard to change any issues that come up. A flexible system can adapt according to what issues arise, and this is a NATO force. A Russian military force is a very rigid structure. If any issues come up, the solution for this issue might take a long time, and this time is vital for Russia, because if time goes on, Ukraine gets more and more Western technology, Western weaponry, more and more troops finish their training. This is what we're seeing. This is the great Russian offensive, and it is already showing signs of failure, and after that, the great Ukrainian offensive will begin. I would call May or June. The fields are not wet anymore and Ukraine has Western tanks and Western infantry fighting vehicles. I think they will go on an offensive. Next video we're going to watch is from Kadyrov, Putin's puppet in Chechnya. And he boasts about the results the Russian army is making in Ukraine.
Inshallah, мы заберем и Одессу, и Харьков, и Киев, и потихоньку идем, да, благодаря всем структурам, подразделениям.
We're slowly making progress thanks to the structures and units. This is a very generalized sentence, and because of the structure of the army and the unit structure, they're actually taking so many losses. So this sentence should be the opposite.
Вероисповеданиям, которые сегодня объединились вокруг призыва нашего президента, мы сегодня показываем такие показатели.
Also, I have to open up this sentence thanks to the religions and people who have united under the president. I cannot call all Chechens Kadyrovites, but I'm specifically being here Kadyrovites fighting under Russia in Ukraine. They think of themselves as superhumans, and they see Russian army as subhumans, and Mobics and prisoners, they're not people at all. So this is not a unification of peoples. Kadyrovites are pretty much Nazis in the way they see Russians as subhumans and Ukrainians also. It is very strange.
Которые даже не снились Запад и натовским государствам, и Евросоюзу. Иншаллах, пробьемся и дойдем до Польши, которая кричит вовсю, хотя у них нет никаких возможностей. И еще раз хочу сказать, что танки, которые они выделяют, даже людей успокоит. Это вообще ничего не значит. У них есть и танки, есть и батареи, есть и самолеты, есть, так сказать, ну, использовать на территории СВО нет возможности, потому что наше ПВО работает оперативно.
So as we can see, it's not only Putin who is living in dreamland, it is also Kadyrov. If you're in a Russian system, you're high up, that means you are being lied to. That's what the system is like. You cannot tell the truth, otherwise you will be sacked or thrown out of the window. Kadyrov is one of the highest positions in Russia. He is the dictator of a huge area. He has fallen victim to their own propaganda, which states that they are so powerful and they're doing great. And the special military operation is doing great. This is, I guess, what Putin also believes. I would honestly dare to say this. I have a better understanding of what's going on in Ukraine with Russian forces than Kadyrov or Putin does. And this is a very bold statement, but I can stand by it. 60 American Bradley infantry fighting vehicles are unloaded in the port of Bremerhaven. They are part of the United States aid packet to Ukraine. Another ship with 90 infantry fighting vehicles is scheduled to arrive in Bremerhaven later this week. I'm glad to see that these United States aid packets are not just on paper. We have seen this pattern repeat itself in the war. The United States announces something and it actually arrives in Ukraine in timely manner. Time is of the essence, and the United States knows this. Bradleys will be in Ukraine sooner than a month, I think. Poland just announced their plans to send Ukraine 60 of their modernized T-72s and BT-91-20s, as well as 14 Leopard tanks. The EU countries have some modernized T-72s left, and they can be sent immediately. No permission needed from anybody. Ukraine doesn't need to train on them. Their logistics for their spare parts and ammunition is already set up. The T-72 is a wonderful tank on a battlefield. It works, it's robust, and Ukrainians know how to operate and fix them. So more than any Leopard tank in the future, they are necessary, but right now T-72s would have more of an impact than a Leopard in 3 months. In this video we're gonna watch Major Vadim Kodak from the 4th Tank Brigade. He's originally from Dnipro. He describes his experience and the Ukrainian troops' experience with training on Leopards. The training is happening already.
На сьогоднішній день я можу сказати, що машина дуже якісна, дуже хороша. І саме те, що мені подобається, вона дуже сподобалась нашим солдатам. Я думаю, що цього терміну, який нам визначений.
I mean, the time given to them to train is fast-paced. In peacetime, the time would be 3 times longer to train on these vehicles. But Ukrainians have showed us before that they are able to learn the Western technology incredibly fast. Much faster than the Western powers thought anyone could learn it. This is one thing I really like about the Ukrainians.
Буде досить для того, щоб освоїти дану техніку. Всі мої солдати, також і я особисто, ми приїхали з Східного фронту, Донецьк-Луганськ. Безпосередньо з району бойових дій. Тобі ж нас не було багато часу, тобто нам поступила команда і буквально 2-3 дні і ми вже були в Польщі. На даний час нам дуже бракує бронетехніки. І я сподіваюся, що коли ми прийдемо з цією технікою на передову, вона врятує дуже багато життів нашим солдатам, а також приблизить нас до перемоги. Мені на сьогоднішній день 57 років, і я вже давно на пенсії, але в перший день війни я прийшов добровольцем і пішов на війну.
Denmark has given Ukraine all of their Caesar howitzers. Why do most of the European countries, Eastern European countries and some Central European countries have militaries? The answer is Russia. And Denmark knows this. Ukraine is eliminating that threat for the EU. That is why Estonia has given about 35% of our entire military capability towards Ukraine, because we understand it. And I think more countries should follow Estonia's and Danish example. Give more, because it saves these countries a lot of money in the future. If Russia would not be put in their place, that would be a much more expensive outcome than to give these tanks and howitzers right now to Ukraine. The Dutch F-35s intercepted 3 Russian military aircraft near Poland and escorted them back to the Russian airspace. The unknown Russian aircraft approached NATO airspace from Kaliningrad. After identification, it turned out to be 3 aircraft. A Russian IL-20 was escorted by 2 Su-27 flankers. The Dutch F-35 squadron escorted the Russian aircraft from a distance. Russia tests NATO countries like that. They send some aircraft over NATO airspace. It was not uncommon before the war for Russia to send their planes into Estonian airspace. NATO fighters in Estonia scrambled to escort them back to Russia. This is how Putin tests the NATO's response time, willingness to respond, and the response aggressiveness, the strength of it. So if these small instances happened, NATO needs to respond very aggressively and quickly, and in this case I'm very glad the F-35s immediately scrambled to escort the fighters out of NATO airspace. This sends a clear message to Putin: you cannot fly over NATO airspace, it is guarded well, the response will be quick and aggressive. Elon Musk has cut some connectivity of Starlink to the Ukrainian armed forces. He says that he never intended for Starlink to be used in offensive operations. Answering a request from a former NASA astronaut to restore the full connectivity to the Ukrainian armed forces, Elon Musk responded this in a tweet, and I quote, "Starlink is the communication backbone of Ukraine, especially at the front lines, where almost all of their internet connectivity has been destroyed. But we will not enable escalation of conflict that might lead to World War III." So Elon Musk is playing the moral and ethical card here that he is preventing World War III. If you look at his actions from a bystander viewpoint, which actions benefit who? Starlink intensely helps Ukraine. Taking Starlink away from Ukraine intensely helps Russia. Elon Musk knows this very well. It might not be his direct intention to help Russia, but this is what it does. I see this decision by Elon Musk, unfortunately, giving more to Russia, not as taking away from Ukraine, but giving to Russia by taking away from Ukraine. Very unfortunate. The United States has told its citizens to leave Russia immediately. The United States has warned its citizens in Russia that Moscow might force US citizens into the service of the Russian armed forces and send them to the front. United States citizens might be used as a political weapon against USA by harassing them, by forcing them into the service. And this final video I will translate to you. It came out at the same time as the Vuhledar disaster, where Russia lost a convoy of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, and their Marines next to it were running away. And here Putin is saying that our Marines are fighting heroically. I think me and Vladimir Putin have a very different understanding of the word heroic. Now, my friends, I want to thank the Patreons. 5 new names who have supported this channel. I'm involved in a huge project that will come out to this channel in a few days, and I could do it thanks to the Patreons. So I wanna acknowledge them. Stephen Fernald, Märten Ausing, Alvin Dickens, Brendan, Diane Levis. Thank you to all of these patrons. If you want to support my channel, then the Patreon is the best and fastest way to do so. Who knows, I might be butchering your name the way you've never imagined it. Link is in the description below. If you like my videos, please subscribe to the channel, and until my next video, Slava Ukraini.